Good morning. My name's James Stevens. I'm a navigation instructor who got lost on the way here. So well done to all of you that found this room, which wasn't very easy. So today, this morning, Arjen is going to speak to us on, as you can see, sail training as a professional tool for maritime education. He's got a lot of experience in both education and sail training. His CV is in your pack, so I won't read that out for you. But I'm also involved in education and sail training, so I'm very much looking forward to it. So I can hand over now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning. I see that more people than I expected have survived the last night. You look all very sober and fit. I'm happy to see that. Well, introduced as Arjen Mintjes, member of Tall Ships Board in Harlingen, but also since 1999 director of the Maritime Academy in Harlingen, and involved in sail training since a very long time. I was a captain for 20 years, sailing my own vessels. The last one was a 3-mast schooner, a Dutch one, and I sailed a lot with young people. After that, in 1999, because I, in a former life, studied educational psychology, I was asked to be the new director of a small school in Harlingen. And I tried to tell you a little bit about how our institute grew, how we use ships for training purposes, how we use sail training vessels since 2004, what the demands are for sail training vessels to have a successful sail training with our students, a little bit otherwise than the normal trainees you have on board, and some new developments where we work together with Christian Radich, and especially this year, seeing how the maritime world develops. I see a future for sail training vessels, and I will tell you a little bit about that. Okay, well, a little bit about our institute. It's not only the Maritime Academy in Harlingen. Since a few years we have an association of all maritime institutes in the northern part of the Netherlands, where we combine 6 institutes, very old ones. The first one in Amsterdam was founded in 1795. It's the oldest school of the Netherlands, and then Harlingen came in 1818. So in 2 years' time we will celebrate our 200 years anniversary in Harlingen. And I'm very happy that all the tall ships will be in the harbor then. That's fine, 1918. Tall ships races end in Harlingen, beginning of August. Well, we do have a lot of different types of education. Secondary, even the 12 years old attend our school. 12 till 16. Then we have the vocational training for the inlet navigation, maritime techniques, and maritime sailing. And then we have the bachelor and master students. In total, we have about 2,400 regular students, and we train approximately 5,000 adults a year in all kinds of proficiency, advanced firefighting, and so on. All the courses you are well familiar with from the STCW. As said, inlet navigation plays a big role in the Netherlands. You have to imagine that out of 14,000 European barges, 8,500 are Dutch. Together with our Rotterdam colleagues, we train 60% of all inlet navigational personnel in the whole of Europe. That's a lot. So half of my secondary students go into inlet navigation. I will tell you later about that. We possess a lot of simulator centers, 3 full mission centers for the seagoing vessels, 2 inlet navigational centers. One opened 1 month ago. It's the most advanced inlet navigational full simulator in the world. And I'm very proud of that, because inlet navigation seems to be a little bit, the other way around than maritime. It's not so well known. But to sail an inlet barge of 186 meters on the River Rhine, it takes a lot of experience. And we can train them on this very advanced full mission simulator. We have 1 proficiency training center, firefighting training centers, and we also possess 6 training vessels. Well, unfortunately, no one under sail. And that's where I hope to make a change later on. Well, I said it, our institutes are founded and based in the northern part of the Netherlands. If you look at the radar screen, you see Amsterdam. And IJmuiden, well known as Sail Amsterdam, you enter the locks in IJmuiden. Our building is nearby the locks. You pass it every time you go to Sail Amsterdam. Then on the former island of Urk, Harlingen and Terschelling, you pass the island of Terschelling going to the tall ships races in Harlingen. And then we have a base in Delfzijl, also familiar with you, Delfzijl. And then we have 2 shipbuilding training centers in Sneek and in Leeuwarden. Yeah, well, just a short overview. I always say one picture says more than 1,000 of words. This is an overview of few of our equipment. On the left side you see small boats building, proficiency center, full mission simulators, training vessels, firefighting, and so on. For those of you who are familiar with education, this must look like a normal way of life. We always state that our institutes do have 3 legs to stand on. It's not 2, but 3. The school for the theoretical and the practical part, the normal examination, for example, in secondary education, we provide a normal secondary 4-year training in the technical direction. But half of the time is spent on a nautical training. So after finishing secondary school, even when they are 15 or 16 years old, they are on the deckhand level for inland navigation and also for the seagoing vessels. So they have had a small basic training, they have had firefighting equipment, they do have their first aid, even at that young age. And you have to imagine that half of them will directly go on board of inland vessels and work there, be paid as a deckhand, and continue on the vocational level. 97% of them continue their normal secondary education in the vocational part. From them, 40% is going to a bachelor and a master study afterwards. So that's the ground idea behind our system. Start at a young age and finish at the highest level.
Or being 17 and a captain.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah.
He's speaking out of his own experience.
How much did you pay him for that?
Oh yeah, there will be surprises in the public of all the way. Okay, well, and then comes the second part. We have our boarding homes. In Harlingen we have a boarding home for 250, on the island of Terschelling for 300, and then in IJmuiden we have 120, and we possess some flats where the vocational students live. This is not because they come all the way from all over Holland. That's one of the reasons, but the main reason is that they need to have a certain attitude to work on a ship successfully. Well, I don't have to tell you when you're a sailor. But the normal system is you have a normal secondary training, 5 years for example. Then you go to the bachelor training, 2 years in school, theoretically. And after that, you're a sailor. And then you go on board, and maybe some of you experience this, cadets coming on board, having no experience at all on a ship. Having no attitude. Never being away from mum. Never seen the toilet pot from the inside. And that's where we train them. Even the 12 years old, when they come from abroad, we bring them in our boarding home, then it's a little bit family-like. But after 2 years, they're self-sufficient. They wake up at their time, but they have to attend school in time. They clean their rooms. They help in the kitchen. They can prepare a meal. They can make coffee, and so on, and so on. All those little things you need on board, but you do not learn when you are with mummy at home. You have to be away 5 days a week. It's from Monday to Friday. We always say to our students, well, you're on the ship. You start Monday at 8. You leave it at Friday 17. And then you can go home. For those parents who are a little bit uncertain about the future of their small kind, I always tell them, well, a year has 365 nights. We have them 4 nights a week, 40 weeks, that's 160. So most of the time he or she will stay at home. And that settles them then a little bit down. The third leg of our institutes are the ships, training vessels. In my opinion, it's impossible to learn a profession like to be a sailor or inland navigator without being on a ship. When you have the very young ones, you can't place them on economic used ships, sailing 24 hours, 7 days a week. That's impossible, it's too dangerous. So we have our own training vessels. In earlier days, historically, we had also seagoing vessels. I can show you a picture. On the left side, it was Princess Margriet. Well, those who are a little bit known with the history of the Princess Margriet, on the right side, that's Princess Margriet, but now it's a mega yacht called Sherakan. You will see here in the Mediterranean. She just came out of the yacht in for a refit in Harlingen. On the left side under, Prince Hendrik was the first sailing training vessel in the Netherlands, 1921. And that's a tradition, they're all called after the royal family. So that was Prince Hendrik. And on the right we have the Princess Irene. She's still under command, sailing from Strasbourg, from our French colleague school. But these were the old ships. Well, they did their job. But Princess Margriet in the 80s was sold because it was impossible for our institute to pay for it. She had a crew of 36 because they sailed day and night with students. And it was impossible to maintain her, and we replaced that by simulators. I don't know what the thought was behind that, because only on a simulator you do not learn anything about how it is to be at sea, in my opinion. But in those days they really believed that the simulator could replace the whole ship. Okay, that's not my opinion. Now we possess a few other ships. On the left we have a dry cargo vessel. It's a real cargo vessel. My students sail it. In this picture it's underway for Bavaria, a big beer brewer in the Netherlands, with a new beer brew tank. Very interesting for our students. On the right hand you see the combination Princess Maxima, Princess Amalia coming in. It's a push-barge combination, passenger vessel and a liquid cargo tanker, a small one. And we possess two hydrographic ships, Gerinus and Octans. Octans, the blue one, is sailing from Terschelling. Well, of course, they only sail inland. Lake IJssel, on the Waddenzee, but not on the maritime. And that's a pity, in my view. We're also building a new one, very small one. We got a gift, and we have to build a new one now. Yeah, sometimes it happens, sometimes you're lucky. Those ships just can give us enough time to train our students a little bit, but it's not enough. For example, on the secondary level, our 15-year-olds have to make the choice between a maritime career, going to sea, or an inland career. And this is a serious choice, because between those systems there's a huge difference. You can't go on the inland and later on to the sea. Well, you can, but that takes a lot of time and it's not efficient. So how to make this choice? Yeah. Granddad told a beautiful story about a historical ship he was on and being in Africa, laying there for 2 weeks and visiting all the beautiful ladies over there. This does influence the choice of the youngster, but it is not a real choice. We do not want them to make a choice without knowing what it is. So they have to go to sea. And it is a big choice. On this picture, you can also see the difference between the seagoing and the inland. The inland is bigger. Wait a minute. I miss a picture over here. Okay. Hey, that's strange. Well, there's the whole picture from my presentation gone. I see, that's strange. I don't know where it is. Hey. Is anyone... Okay, well, okay. I wanted to show a little bit about the project we have, I Go to Sea. We had a big project with Splithof on big cargo vessels, a ro-ro vessel. I had a film put inside, but it's gone. Sorry. Maybe we find it later on in the presentation. It shows how our 15 years old are on a big container vessel, ro-ro vessel, sailing from Antwerp to Hamina, and then to Hanko, Kotka, and then back in 1 week. We had a big project, building with Splithof 6 new vessels, big vessels, with a second bridge. So up the normal wheelhouse, there was a second bridge. We equipped it with all the gear you are normally in, and our students were in the wheelhouse, without disturbing the normal crew. And they sailed worldwide. And this is a way, with a sail training officer, a former mate from Splithof, out of order. And so they learned a lot about being on a vessel in real conditions. That was one of the parts of the project. It was called I Go to Sea. The second part was that our youngsters, 15 years old, went on the ro-ro vessel and really worked as a crew on that. Well, that takes some measures. 15 years old on a big seagoing vessel. When they arrived in Antwerp, in the first time we sent our teachers with them, but after that they had to go alone. And they were afraid to enter the ship because it was so big. It looks to them as a cathedral, especially the ro-ro ones, because they have this ramp on the backside. And it's a big hole where you have to go inside. They were really afraid to go there, so we had to help them. But after that, they made the voyage of 8 days. Every week we had some on board, and they learned a lot. I hope to show you a little bit about it later. Well, then the sail training. Since 2004, we said, okay, when the youngsters have to make a choice, they have to make a real choice. What's better to learn how it is at sea than on a sail training vessel? And since 2004, we use a lot of sail training vessels. I wrote a few names down. I'm not sure if I cover it all, but we started with Eendracht, Europa, Morgenster, Gulden Leeuw, Alexander von Humboldt, Wilde Swan, Thalassa, Surlanded, but it might be very more. So every year we sent about 60, 70 of our students for at least 1 week to sea. And this is a small example of a voyage on board of Surlanded. It's in Dutch, but I will translate what the youngsters are saying, because they are interviewed how it was and what they learned. Let's have a look. Let's try to open it. There it is.
s'nachts hier binnen en dat alles tekeer ging en zo, dat je bijna naar bed vloog. Dat vond ik wel het mooiste. Ja.
Een dieptepunt gehad?
Nee, niet echt.
Nee, eigenlijk niet. Wat heb je ervan geleerd?
Ja.
Nou, een beetje discipline aangebracht. Dat je gewoon elke dag, elke ochtend moet je dan alles opruimen en zo. En dan als het niet opgeruimd wordt, dan wordt het weggegooid. Nou, vond je het dan leuk om met elkaar te doen?
Ja, dat wel.
So the question is, what did you learn? Well, some discipline. What's discipline? Well, we had to take away every morning our gear. We didn't leave our stuff. We had to work together. This is small words, discipline, cleaning up the mess, working together. And they go on.
Leuk wel, zo'n zaak ken ik niet en dat is wel leuk met een andere groep er ook bij.
In het begin, nee, je zag wel in het vliegtuig en zo dan echt 2 aparte groepen en nu zie je echt gewoon één grote groep die elkaar
Ja.
zit. Dus dat is, ja,
Dat is wel leuk.
Ik heb er ook weer allemaal vriendinnen bij. Dus het is wel, het eerste wat ik ga doen als ik thuis kom, is lekker onder mijn ijzerdouche staan. En dat eten. Ik weet niet, maar ik heb ook
So the girl's telling the first thing I will do when I'm at home is going under my own shower. We combined two groups. We combined two groups. It was a group, two different groups. They didn't know each other before, and they sailed from Harlingen to Christiansand and came back. And it was a group with more girls and a group with more boys. So we had a very interesting interaction between them. But in the end, they coped very well, and they were all from, well, what we will not call very social equipped families. That's an euphemisme, we say in Dutch, euphemism. Some of them came from very, very bad and poor conditions. That's another example.
Nou, ik vond het eigenlijk heel erg leuk. Maar ja, sommige dingen die vielen wel wat tegen. Maar verder op zich was het wel heel erg leuk om te doen. Wat ik nog van geleerd.
Ja, ik vond het te kort.
Te kort.
Ja, want het was super.
We hebben wel langer gehad.
Ja, absoluut. Nog een weekje, 2 weken erbij. Lekker stuk zeilen, heerlijk.
Wat hebben we ervan geleerd? Ja, zeilen en ja, niet geleerd.
Teamwork.
Teamwork. Ja, maar ja, ik weet wel wat teamwork is en dat doe ik wel vaak. Dus op zich heb ik daar niet echt veel van geleerd.
Ja, het heeft bij mij wel versterkt, absoluut.
Hoe komt het dat het bij jullie goed raakt? Ja, ik weet niet, ik denk dat het een heel leuke sfeer was. Ja, ik heb ook snel als het niet goed gaat. Ik kan hier ook niet weg of zo als je iemand echt ruzie krijgt met iemand.
Well, what did you learn? Teamwork. And then the girl says, well, teamwork, I'm very familiar with teamwork. But then she states, but it's very good, you can't run away here. We're always with the same people on the same ground. And that's also a very, very important part of it.
Nou, ik moet gewoon een beetje mijn maat tegen elkaar gaan vinden.
Doet het er nog toe van hoe is het op het moment zelf is? Was het jullie uitleggen?
Ja,
Creëren zij ook een sfeer? Of wat?
Ja. Ja, het is super belangrijk vind ik het.
nou,
De mensen die blijven vriendelijk en vrolijk. En, die lieten het desnoods 10 keer uitleggen als je het niet begrijpt. En ja, ze blijven heel rustig. En veel discipline. Dus, maar dat heb ik ook nodig aan boord. Dus,
Wat ga je doen als je in de thuis staat?
dan is het een huis en dan gaan we vertellen. Ja, is dat niet?
And then they are asked, well, and the crew, well, they're always friendly. They're always making jokes. There's a good atmosphere, and they always stay calm. And that's, I guess, very important, because they're not used to that. At home, it's not calm and friendly. And the girl answers, and what are you going to do when you're at home? Well, first I go home, and then I go out. And that's real life. That's how it goes. So when we talk about sail training with 12 to 16 years old, and well, the youngest ones are 15, sometimes we have an exception of 14 years old, they're in a third degree. There are certain demands for the crews. And I want to emphasize this, because we had very good experiences, but we also had a little bit of bad experiences. What's the demand for a successful sail training for our secondary level students? The vocational ones are different. Well, please realize the difference between normal STI trainees. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to say, but for me, the normal STI trainee is a good English-speaking girl, 22 years old, high social family, having money to buy it. It's not the average, but okay, that's what I see on the ships during summer. And our 15-year-old male students, they're a little bit different. They come from families where you do not speak polite, where you have not learned to use when they're at our school, they learn to eat with a knife and a fork, but normally you eat with your hands. They're familiar with a hamburger or fries, but no other food. They use a little bit of bad language, and so on and so on. So if you have such a kettle on board, please provide a continuous sail training program, 24/7. Don't interrupt it. Don't start with 2 hours of a break. Then you're gone. Because this break will cause that the kettle runs away. You never get a kettle inside. Be very clear in what's allowed and what's not allowed. Very clear. We are very fond of the Norwegian ships. I will later tell you why. But reporting a watch change, it's oi, you're there. And you have to be there. If you're not there, the crew will pick you out of your cabin and will place you on deck, even if you're in your underpants. But they will. It sounds severe, but it has to be done, because otherwise, if they see you hesitating, getting them out of the bunk, they will stay in the bunk. That's very simple. And of course, they are very motivated to become a mariner, but they are adolescents. They are just young people, 15 years old. They do everything God has forbidden, even within our boarding house and within our school, where we have a zero tolerance on drugs, violence, drinks, booze, and theft. We have a zero tolerance. It's one warning, because every young man or woman can make a mistake, but after that it's gone. You're going out of the school. We're very severe on that. But on the ship, it's another environment. There are other people. They are not controlled in their view. So be clear. Don't go into harbors. That's asking for trouble. Well, of course, if there's a nice harbor and we have an ending, it's good. But when you go into a harbor, make good statements about what they are allowed to do and what not. And we have discovered, Einar, that there is no difference between Norwegian students and Dutch students on that moment. Because they are young people and they try everything, as you did when you were so young. Okay. Yeah, after doing this successfully for many years, a few years ago, we met the people of Christian Radig, and I spoke with Klaas, and well, we had the same problems. Radig sailed with 62 students last year, but they have to provide STCW training. And you can do a lot about Christian Radig, but not everything about cargo, dangerous cargo, unloading, loading, liquid cargo, and so on. It's impossible. We were searching for a big vessel, a very good vessel, for our exchange program. So last year we had an exchange program. And I have to tell you that this was a very, very good system, because as an educational institute, we do not possess lots of money. So during the last 14 years, I had many troubles to find the financing part of these trips, because you have to be paid for as ships. But we do not have extra money to pay for. We can't ask our parents, the parents from the students, because they do not have it. They pay a little fee for the boarding house and that's all. And secondary education in the Netherlands is free of charge. So for the boarding home, we have to charge them, but that's the maximum. And we divided this into the salaries. So we have mums staying alone at home, divorced and so on, no job, having no money. And they can pay out of an income they get from the state until the rich, and they can pay for everything. But you can't have a whole class on board without extra money. So that was bothering me a lot. But we found a way. We had an exchange program, and it was very successful. What's happening in the maritime sector at the moment? I just saw this, I got it from Jan Reijer. It's Trade Winds, it's a maritime magazine, and here you can read that COSCO CS, China, access recruitment of cadets for coming year. It's the biggest container carrier in China. They had hundreds of students at maritime institutes who had an undersigned letter from the firm that they could work there. They could have an apprenticeship over there. They could work there as a cadet. Well, 1 week ago they all got a letter, sorry, we do not have a job for you. You know what it means. All those cadets, hundreds of them in China, can't get work now. They can't continue their study. This is a disaster. We have faced this problem in Norway for the last 3 years when the offshore industry came down. And now, you see it here on the pictures, we see the same in the Netherlands. There's Abish shipping 21 ships, bankrupt. We have Flinter, bankrupt. We have our offshore vessels laying in the harbor in masses. No work. That's the trouble, because our cadets cannot find a proper trainee place. And there we get a problem. So, we had this pilot project on board from the Christian Radich. I told you we have the secondary students, but we also have our vocational ones. They had a 2-year training. Some of you might have a trainee on board. But in this year we had 7 of them, from who are 3 out of the Republic of Suriname, because we take care of that also, who couldn't find a place. And I found Einar and I said, okay, let's try it. Let's give it a try. Let's have the Dutch students on a Norwegian ship. Same circumstances, same STCW training record book, but different authorities. So they had to be assessed by the Dutch authorities. And it came out it was not that hard to get that done. We had experience with Dutch trainees on Dutch sailing vessels, but not on a Norwegian one. We do have some problems with insurance and so on, because it's Dutch law and it's Norwegian law, and when you have to combine that, that's not so easy. In this way, we limit the costs for both parties, because Einar has more students on board. Of course, we do have to pay for them. That's not normal. Our students go on board of big ships being paid, but that's not reality at the moment. And until now, there are now 3 months on board. It's going very well. We have a Dutch watch on board and 2 Norwegian watches, and it works. They use the same stuff, they have the same training program, they have the same training record book, they have the same STCW demands, and they were assessed by the Dutch authorities, and it went well. So I see a future over here. For us, as also the board of the tall ships races in Harlingen, it's a very good combination, because the ship will enter the harbor several times. We have a program over there. We can show the inhabitants of Harlingen that these ships use the harbor, but bring more than only being a very beautiful ship in the harbor as a site. We use them as a training tool. And that's, at the moment, a very positive evolution in maritime training, I guess. Well, I said when you have secondary training on board, secondary students, you have to be aware of some problems. I can tell you a little story. Einar, am I allowed to tell the story about Steph? Okay, no, okay. Don't be disturbed, and maybe you should stop the red light now, but okay. We had Steph. Steph is a young boy, 15 years age, and he came during the exchange on board. We warned the crew, Steph is a little bit, well, we call it, he has it behind the elbows. He's not, he says that, but he does that. He was warned before, and we used the buddy system. So 1 Dutch and 1 Norwegian guy together. So they coupled Steph to a real tough Norwegian guy. But Steph was on board for 20 minutes, I believe, when he wrote on the white ship with a black pencil, unwashable, homo. Homo. Do I have to explain gay? It's the most used bad word in the Netherlands by youngsters. And I do not want to state anything about that, but he used it. And he wrote it down in big. So the crew was a little bit upset, but they didn't say anything. They said, okay, wiped it out. But after that, the whole crew, when they met Steph on board, they said, hey, homo, how are you? And Steph didn't like that. And it was during day and night. So Steph was thinking, what could I do? What can I do? Well, the only thing he couldn't react on was his buddy. Yeah, very tough Norwegian guy, but okay. So he called him all the moments. He was interrupting. He was, well, using the word homo all the time and so on. And it went on and on and on. But the Norwegian guy was very well instructed, didn't react at all. Took him up in the mast and so on. So at 12 o'clock, when the watches changed in the night, Steph said, I'm very tired, I'm going to my bunk. And then the Norwegian guy said, no, you're not going to your bunk. You're going to my bunk. I'm a homo, I'm going to fuck you in your ass. And then little Steph got a little bit nervous. He cried very loud. He shouted about. He went to his teacher and. But after that, until now, we did not have any problem with little Steph anymore. So Klaas Jemgum, the captain, took his phone and phoned me in my office and said, well, Arjen, this is not the pedagogical way, but I guess this works. I said, Klaas, continue, please. It sounds a little bit hard, but it works. And maybe this is the way we have to train them, because otherwise they will not behave forever. Okay. Yeah. At the moment, we have a new project because, well, exchange with Christian Radich is nice, but we have to prepare them. We want to avoid the situations like Stef and so on. So we are now in an association, and the association bought an old Kofchalk. A Kofchalk, these were the Baltic freighters from before the Second World War, the Dutch ones. They're huge, they're plump, they're not sailing very fast, but they could carry a lot of cargo into the Baltic. So they sailed the whole Baltic. And this is the biggest one left. We have in the Netherlands, I believe, we have 4 of them. And this one has been restored during the last years, and it's having a cargo hull. It doesn't have passenger accommodation, only the old crew accommodation, but no passenger accommodation. It's not a passenger vessel, it's a cargo vessel. And we came into contact with the owner. We were working with him a long time, and then he said, well, we have to use the ship. And I said, okay, we can use it. So now we use it as a training vessel. That means that there are only 10 of our students going a week. So every secondary student, 15 years old, goes for a week on the Tromp, it's called. They sail for 1 week in the Waddenzee, outside the islands when the weather allows it. They are very seaworthy, but okay, we don't take any risk. And they're not going into a harbor. They only lay for anchor or sail day and night in the small, shallow waters around the islands. They don't visit the harbors. Well, the project is running. We have to change a little bit more, because what we see is that Dutch crews are not so used to be very tough on youngsters. I always say Dutch young people are the most happiest in the world. That comes out of every investigation. But Dutch parents are the baddest pedagogical people in the world. It's not going well in the Netherlands when we look at that. Discipline, hierarchy, and so on, the normal words there are not so used. We are very friendly to our kids. If they want to be a dancer, well, be a dancer. If you want to be, and so on. And we try to guide them through life. But from time to time, in my opinion, it should be better to tell them a little bit, well, this is what you can do and this is what you are not allowed to do. And there we are not so strong. And we had the same experience with this crew. They were too friendly. They made every mistake you do not make anymore because you're experienced. So this is a pilot. Well, I'm curious if we can have it, but we are now co-owner of the ship and can transport a little bit of cargo under sail, and that's official. That's also a very good goal, I guess. Okay. Well, coming to the conclusions, I see a very bright future for sail training vessels being used in maritime education. In the Russian Federation, in the eastern part of Europe, we use for every cadet a sail training vessel. But in the rest of the world, especially in the western part of Europe, we do not. We did it before the Second World War, but after that not. And in my opinion, when the maritime world continues like this, companies bankrupt, there will be no, or at least far less places for our trainees, for our cadets. So we have to find other solutions. And there sail training comes into sight. I heard about 6 Dutch ships having cadets, Dutch cadets on board, but they have 1 or 2. And I'm convinced that a program like we have with Christian Radich could provide for the first period of 4 months, where they have to go to sea, for a far better solution. Because, of course, the training record book of the STCW has some tasks in it you can't do on a sailing vessel. But most of the tasks can be carried out very good. And I guess more and more maritime institutes will be willing to pay you a little bit for their cadets to come on board, if they get a proper training. So you do need to have a proper training program based on the STCW. Lots of it can be carried out during the second period where they go on board. But on the first period, sail training vessels are very, very appropriate to use. I see a lot of exchange possibilities. We have these programs going on in secondary education. We have class afloat, we have school at sea, we have master skip from Willerswan. They have another goal. Secondary students going for 1 year or half a year on board. It's very good, but it's more the social development, and of course there is some maritime developments in it. Of course, Martin knows everything about it. He was on for 5 years for school at sea on the Regina Maris. Yeah. But that's one thing, and it's a very good one. But the use in proper maritime education with youngsters could be better. we could use sail training vessels more and more, and we have to convince my colleagues in the maritime institutes. They are not familiar with sailing vessels. You can't imagine. This morning I was speaking to Harco, captain of the Bark Europa, and I said, you have to imagine that all my colleagues were on big container vessels, big tankers. They never were on board of sailing vessels, so they will not get the idea to use a sailing vessel. For them, a sailing vessel is a dinky toy. If you're standing on the bridge 60 meters above sea level, and you see a tall ship, it's not a tall ship. It looks like a very small yacht. And that's their imagination. So we have to convince my colleagues in the western part of Europe of the possibilities. And this might be not the idea you have of professional maritime education, but in reality it is. Of course, we do have colleagues who are very interested in sail training, but most of them are not aware of the possibilities. But if you offer them a traineeship, use the STCW guidelines. Have a proper training scheme. Use every task out of the training record book, because otherwise you are not allowed to do so. And take care of an assessment by the authorities. In every country in Western Europe, a sailing vessel class A or B can be assessed by authorities. I heard of Alexander von Humboldt having huge problems with it. They tried to have German students on board. They were not allowed by the German authorities. Well, come to the Netherlands and be assessed by the Dutch authorities. That's a tip. That might work, because they will assess and they will give you the possibility. And then you can take your German students on board. So search for a country where you are allowed to do so, because it's an international world. Well, one project I can mention, especially in 2017, when coming back from Canada, Windseeker is now approaching every maritime institute in the world to have maritime students making the cross-ocean tour on Gulden Leeuw. And we hope that a lot of those maritime institutes will respond, because then we have the possibility to show them that a sailing vessel also is very worthwhile to use. Well, it's a pity I couldn't show you my big row vessel with our secondary students. I don't know why it was gone, but maybe there are questions, or there are... Yeah, okay. First.
I can tell I will graduate this year from Maritime Academy in Antwerp.
Yeah.
And we have the system in the first year. We go sailing 1 month with the Darmajeji, which is also a sailing vessel. And I'm now has been as cadet, but I also was coached this year, and I will be next year as well. And for most, so it's 120 cadets, so the whole first year goes. And it's a really good experience. I think, in my opinion, it's really good. Indeed, sail training a little bit. But I also heard negative comments from students. They were like, it's totally different than the cargo world, of course. And we study for cargo vessels. So they totally have a different view when they did Darmajeji stuff. And then they go to a cargo vessel and they're like, yeah, I don't like it at all. But the Darmajeji was more the fun and the sail training. And we give them lessons about, the chart work and stuff as coaches. But I also heard negative comments. And I think that's also a thing to review as Maritime Institute itself. Are the students happy with going on a sailing ship, because it's totally different? And we also see now the problem. I think this year 40 students graduated, and at this time 6 students have a job or an internship. Indeed, the whole cargo world is done for this moment, and finding an internship is like really hard. You just wait a year and you've had 50 no's and then maybe 1 yes, but it's a really big problem right now that you don't find a job. So sail training could be a good way to find something at least. So I think it's really good. That's my opinion.
Well, I know the project with DAR. I'm familiar with it. I visited the school in Antwerp several times. In my view, the first period at sea could be on a sail training vessel. If you train people for big cargo vessels, ro-ro, tankers, or so on, they do need a second period or a third period on board of cargo vessels, of course, because that's a whole other world. I agree. But to train them to be on sea, to change watches, to be 24/7 at sea, to experience the weather conditions. You have been on cargo vessels, I guess? Yeah.
Not really, because I couldn't find an internship.
Oh, that's
a few small.
I can tell you from the big ro-ro vessels I went with to Hamina that, you see at your digital equipment that there is a Force 8 outside. I can tell you, I was on one row vessel and the chair of the captain was on wheels. It was a wheelchair. It was not a wheelchair, but it was a chair on the small wheels. And I said, well, this is impossible. I've been to sea for 20 years, but I can't imagine how this can stand. And he said, well, if we are going a little bit around, I will throw out the flaps. And we did. Northwest 7, Skagen, and we went there without, almost any movement. And then we came around the corner and there the small ships were, waiting, northwest. Yeah, but that's the reality. So you do not experience anything on the bridge. But if you open the door, then it's suddenly, wow, hey, there's a gale. It's crazy. I know a story of a container vessel going to Japan, running into the side slope of a typhoon, phoning the office and said, we have to slow down because it's not going well. No, you can't slow down. We have our containers and should be in time. The whole second bottom of the ship was gone when they arrived. But they continued. Well, that's the way. And then the experience being first period at sea on a sailing vessel, standing 1 meter above sail level, experiencing the wind, working with it, feeling it in your hands. For me, that's the best experience you have. And that I predict they are better sailors afterwards. Okay, so I hope. Yeah. Well, there's one question behind them.
Yeah, hi. Your school looks amazing. Could I ask about the funding? How do you fund this school? It looks difficult. Do you get government funding, or how does it work?
No, we're a public school. Mm-hmm. We're just a public school. There are, for the secondary level, there are 3 of these schools, 2 under my command and 1 in Rotterdam. And on the vocational and bachelor level, it's a public school. And the funding is done, I said, for the extras. So to pay the tall ships we work with, I have to find extra funding out of funds, old funds. We did this gigantic project with Splithof, I Go to Sea, and we have an old fund in the Netherlands. It's from the VOC time, still there. They sold some of their paintings of Rembrandt, and they have a lot of money. And because in those days they had them in their boardroom, and afterwards they sold them for hundreds of millions. So they have a lot of money, and we get some out of that fund, but that's the tricky part, to find the funding. And we also use now, for example, during the tall ships races 2014, 100 of our students were trainee on board of a vessel going from Harlingen to Frederikshavn. But they all used crowdfunding. So we trained them to raise their own funding. So in the end we had 337 trainees going from Harlingen to Frederikshavn, and it didn't cost us any penny because of the crowdfunding program. And we're now working on the second lab in 2018 for the same. Yeah. Okay.
Are you approached very often to take historic vessels? And do you have a process that you go by on which vessels you would take or not take?
Yeah. Well, different stories. As a school, I want to be very sure that the vessel is safe. So every standard SOLAS is needed. But we also used smaller ships, but they were under, in the Netherlands it was called Register Holland. They are on a proper survey. And I was a captain myself, so lots of them are former colleagues. I know them, I know how the ship is, but it's not my personal experience. It's certificate, it's under SOLAS. We can't do anything without that, because then, the whole ministry will be in problems. Yes. Yeah. Martin.
Yeah. A friend of mine, he's a pilot, or he was a pilot, and now he's learning new pilots to being a pilot, and he's learning how to maneuver with ships. And he was telling me it's so difficult when you got a pilot on board and hasn't anything with sailing, how to maneuver with a ship, because they don't looking at the wind. And when you got somebody on board who's sailing himself, he's looking at the wind, and it's no problem to maneuver a big ship. When you got a big row, it's taking a lot of wind. And when you're not looking at the wind, it's very difficult to maneuver it. And he said, it's such a problem, you can't learn it because they're not looking at it, and you're telling them, but they got their the doors closed and they don't know anything about wind yet. They got some measurements, but they're not looking at them. And when you're used to being sailing on a sailing ship, you're always looking at the wind, and that's the way how you maneuver.
There's a question.
Thank you, Arjen Mintjes from GeoStay, Danish safe training ship. And thank you for an interesting presentation. And I think you got a very important point. But just a small correction. You said in Western Europe there's no where you use it. In Denmark, we have 2 sail training vessels, Denmark and GUSA, both publicly funded. And we are training approximately 60% of all Danish sailors. They start their career in our ships. Both ships take them on 21 weeks. That's where you start. For GUSA, we have no training in land. It's all on the ship in the basic part. So we have some experience. We have been doing this since 1882 on GUSA, different GUSAs, but never mind. But this is something we have experienced. And our experience in Denmark is a very interesting point about the employment rates. The shore-based Danish naval schools, they have approximately 50% of their students going to get a job. GUSA and Denmark has approximately 99% of our students going directly into the business and actually making it there. And one of the Danish, I had a visit on GUSA a couple of years ago from the chief captain of one of the Triple E ships, the AP Møller Maersk, a big container vessel. And he said, this is the kind of education that all our sailors should have. But they don't, of course, but that's another story. But the basic point is, I think it's a very good point. Sail training on board sailing ships is going to make better sailors, and there are experiences, and I hope you have a good experience with it, and we'd like to help also if anyone wants inspiration or ideas from this maybe a little bit more extensive sail training program where we have them for 21 weeks for start of their career. But good luck with it.
As you have heard, I didn't mention Denmark. But I know of George Say, of course.
Kind of Western Europe.
But your remark about the captain of Maersk telling you this, that's very important. Because we have to convince several persons in the maritime world that this is really contributing to being a good sailor. And then it will it will be very good for them to follow a sail training program and afterwards going on a cargo vessel. We have to convince them.
My name is Billy from Niagara in the United States. What is the difference in the ideology between Eastern Europe and Western Europe in terms of why is sail training so important in Eastern Europe and Russia, but it's not as important in Western Europe? It's the same thing in the U.S. We have some sail training ships over there, but the maritime world is just now starting to even think about it. We have 49 maritime-based high schools in the United States, and Niagara is currently working with 4 of them. But they never even heard of sail training.
No.
So there's
you have
an
answer
difference between Eastern and Western there.
I would submit that everybody in this room is in violent agreement about the value of sail training for maritime vocational education, as illustrated by the comment about the Maersk skipper. But it seems to me that the problem is that even your programs, which are very forward-leaning, are all governed by the STCW requirements. And the STCW requirements do not currently admit of even acknowledge the existence of sail training or the value that comes from it. So I would suggest that probably the breakthrough would be even to have one requirement embedded in STCW that can be satisfied only on a sailing ship, and it would open the floodgates toward the use of sail training vessels for these purposes.
Yeah, but I'm visiting the IMO conference really, but that's a step too far at the moment. We do agree. What you state is there's no such thing as a different ideology about using sail training ships. But in the Russians, for example, Makarov, they're very involved in Mir, so they have a ship, a big ship. They use it for every cadet. It's in their program. In the Netherlands, before the 50s, in the last century, we had it. We had such training vessels. Well, they were motorized, and we didn't have them under sail. But after that, it was a financial issue. It's far cheaper to use simulators. You use them day and night, you use them in every circumstance. And I have to admit that simulators are very good training tools. But it's not the only training tool. Being on a real ship, on a sailing vessel, is more effective. so you have to use the combination of it, and then the cost effectiveness of it comes into sight.
I'm Natalia from Admiral Makarov Academy. I'm from Eastern Europe. And yeah, in Russia we have a great tradition of sail training, which is incorporated into the university program. But I wanted to say that nowadays our training system has reduced very much as compared to the Soviet Union period. You know that our university used to have real merchant ships, which were transporting cargoes between various ports, and with our cadets on board. The whole crew was of the cadets, you know, and supervisors, of course. But and it was 100% financed by the government, and also the ships earned money for the cargo operations. But nowadays, sailing ships, that's all we have now. And yeah, that is our great tradition. We believe that our cadets have an opportunity to smell the real sea, to feel it to the backbone on board, and usually it works. We have great results, as I believe. I've been on board for 7 months altogether, not much as compared, but a few years ago we had, I believe, a very interesting experience when we have invited cadets from all over the world for the international awareness and international tolerance project. And one of the purposes of this project was to make our cadets familiar with sea guys from other countries, so that they could feel comfortable on board foreign ships. And our cadets are recruited on board foreign ships. And we had guys from the United Kingdom, from Denmark, Norway, Philippines, and India. Very broad spectrum of nationalities, and for 2 times we got the prize, the award of Sail Training International as the most international crew. And that was a very challenging experience, but I think it was very, very interesting for both sides, for Russian cadets as well as for international cadets.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. What I've seen we have to imagine that in our world there are traineeships available. Well, there's a shortage, but there are. But when you're in Africa, we were approached by the Global Onboard Training Center in not Niagara, but Nigeria, and they are working on a program for African students because they do not have any possibility. They do not find any ship, so they are building at the moment a real big instruction vessel motorized for 300 cadets at once. I doubt whether this will educate them very well, but this is their only possibility. And we have been approached several times to work with them. We did the design of the ship, and that's far more a problem than we face at the moment. So even there are lots of opportunities for students and for sail training ships if you are willing to go into that area. Well, South Africa is another part, but farther up north there is a real problem. Okay.
Soon from the Sorlande. Yeah. We're currently running a program called the A+ that we started last year, which is running high school classes. But I think the main thing we were looking at is how do you make a tall ship relevant in today's market? And I think I hear it's the same thing you're saying. And there's no way we can compete with like onshore high school with a tall ship. But where we see that the tall ship is relevant to training is. As an example, the Sorlande was relieved as sail training vessel by a motorized vessel back in the 60s. But their big challenge is that when you're done with the morning cleaning routines, you're done with your classes, what do you do with your students? And where the tall ship has a constant need for resources, as you said, it's a great platform because you constantly motivate them, you use them, you give them responsibilities, and they build their personalities. So to be relevant also in the maritime merchant education system, is that, as you say, you can't compete with simulators, you can't compete with, if you want to learn to sail on a tanker vessel, as was said over here, well, you can teach the theories, but you're not a tanker vessel. But what we teach on a tall ship is a huge personal development.
It's the attitude.
Yeah. It's the attitude, as you said, as they said in the movie over there, it's the discipline. We've been working with kids from families with very high resources, but even there, the development they go through is the same as you said with kids from the lower. It's relevant in all of it, but I just think instead of trying to say that you're competing with teaching people how to learn to sail a merchant vessel today, because we can't, but we can teach them something they can't.
Yeah, so the conclusion is there's a lot of opportunities, but we have to use them well.
Yeah, and we have
and
to
try to make it available for everyone. Eh? Yeah. Okay, last question.
Last one,
yeah. Okay.
It's more a statement about Africa, and I think there are many countries that sit with a problem where you've got a large coastline, but we are basically farmers in our hearts. And to change that attitude, you cannot change that on a normal motorized vessel. The only way that you can do it is on a sailing vessel, to get the understanding of the wind, the sea, and the responsibility that it's not somebody else that's making the mistake. It's only you that's responsible. It's only the sailing vessel that can do that for you. You cannot get the salt in the blood of a non-sailor if you do not go the sailing route and go straight to a motor vessel.
Well, that are very wise words. So now we close.
Good place to end.
Okay.
Many thanks, Arjen.
Okay.